Hey everybody. So most people know me that I'm a huge music fan, drummer, love everything about music. But tonight I'm going to do something a little different. Um, Before Janie Lane and before Tommy Lee and yeah, I had heroes. Dan Marino was my hero. Growing up. I mean, I looked up to Dan, and of course Dale Earnhardt was a hero. But even before that, of course, my dad was always my hero, my first hero, be my last hero. But before all that, not dad, but was a fictional character, was my hero, and he's still my hero. Rocky Balboa. And if any of my classmates know about this because, when I was a kid, everything was Rocky. Still everything's Rocky. And we're going to dive into the Rocky movies right after this. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Drummer Boy Jones. I appreciate you coming out and coming on and watching this tonight. Yeah, this is going to be a new one for me because I am mostly a music and uh, podcast, and my love of music goes back a long way. And I'm, you know, the so-called drummer, and but my music, I love music. But like I said in the intro, my dad's always been my hero. But growing up, Rocky was my hero. Got a funny story how it all started. So I'm going to say this is like 1980, 81 maybe, something like that. We had just, so I'm 80, so I'm going to say I'm 10 years old, somewhere around in there. So we had just moved into a house. We had lived in a trailer beside my grandmother's for several years when I was growing up, and a tornado come through and think sort of maybe knocked the blocks, knocked the trailer off the blocks or some. I can't. Of course, I was too young to remember. But anyways, after that night, my dad was like, "We're never staying in the trailer again." So we bought a house, and when me and my mother and my father moved to this house, and uh, just about a couple miles up the road from where we lived, in over on Hillwood Drive, and so so we was living there, and we had moved inside the city limits, and so back in the day, we had antenna television. You had 2, 4, and 5, and that was it. Well, we moved in the city limits, and uh, all of a sudden we could get cable television, and we had a VCR. Whoa, big time, man, big time. So, so this is on a Friday night. I remember plain as day. I can close my eyes and I can just sit here and think. So, on Friday nights, Dukes of Hazzard come on. I had to watch Dukes of Hazzard. Dukes of Hazzard. And my dad was like, "No, we're not watching Dukes of Hazzard tonight." We had one TV, and he was like, "No, there's a new movie coming out on. There's a movie on HBO. I guess it was HBO. I'm pretty sure it was HBO. It's a movie coming out, and I really want to watch it. And it was called Rocky 2. Like I said, this is 80, 81. We'll go through the timeline here in just a little bit. So I was like, "Dad, no, Dukes of Hazzard's coming on. I gotta watch Dukes of Hazzard." He was like, "We're watching Rocky." So, here I am, 8, 9 years old, all pissy. I'm like, "I ain't watching Rocky." So I'm sitting over on the couch pissed off because I can't watch Dukes of Hazzard. And I start watching this Rocky movie, and I can still think, it comes up, it opens up with the ending of the first movie and they're fighting. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. Okay, we'll see. Then, the ending of part one is the first of part two. And then, it even skipping back to that, Rocky 2 in, yellow writing on a black background, scrolling across the screen, and the iconic dun 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 dun, So I mean that had my attention right off the bat, but so yeah, we watched it, and Rocky 2. I mean, for a 8 or 9, 10 year old kid, it's probably boring a little bit, because it's, I was thinking boxing, I was thinking action movie. Wasn't much action in it until, we'll go through what Rocky 2 was in a little bit. But anyways, so the fight came and, and all this and how it ended and all that. And before you know it, me and my dad's up in front of the TV jumping, get up, get up, get up. So it's his fault that I'm a Rocky fan because I didn't want to watch that crap. And it turned out to be, at that time, probably the best thing I'd ever seen. So, with that being said, sometime later on HBO, Rocky 1 come out. Or, come on. And so I went backwards. So I'd seen 2. I went to where I, watch Rocky 1. Once again, for an 8, 9, 10-year-old, sort of boring, right? Good movie. I didn't like it as good as I did the second one because I didn't knew how it went, but it, but it was a good movie. So then it was announced that Rocky 3 was coming out, and this is in 1982. So I would have been 10 years old. So I was probably, 7, 8, 9-year-old during all this stuff. So my dad takes me and some friends of mine to go see Rocky 2 or Rocky 3 at the theater. Opening weekend, Dad went to. And it was the most incredible thing I had ever seen. It was absolutely amazing. Mr. T, the villain, I pity the fool, Mr. T. It was, and from that point on in 1982, hooked. Rocky was my hero. Rocky's still my hero. And so we're going to dive back, and I'm going to talk about each one of these. I've had box sets, I've had VHSs, I've had all the DVDs, I've had all the Blu-rays, I've had all of the, now I've got all of the 4Ks. So I got a couple of them here we'll talk about, but the first definitive set that come out, I remember this come out, it was on Blu-ray, and it's Rocky through Rocky Balboa. The underdog, the champ, the icon. Absolutely. Absolutely. But the original come out in 1976, and it starred, I want to read it where I can read it correctly. And of course it was Sylvester Stallone, and everybody knows the story of, he had $100 or $80 in his banking, in his checkbook, and he had to sell his dog. He was broke, and he wrote this script, and nobody would take it because he wanted to star. He wanted to be Rocky. And they wanted Burt Reynolds, or they wanted, I can't remember all the names, but Ryan, I can't remember. Y'all can watch all that stuff, you know the behind the scenes, but this starred a perfect cast. So Sylvester Stallone, Rocky, also starring Talia Shire as Adrian, Burt Young as Paulie, Carl Weathers as Apollo Creed, Burgess Meredith as Mickey, and it was directed by John G. Avildsen, and the iconic score was Bill Conti. So this is the 4K box set. And, looking back, Rocky's not an action hero. I know we'll get up to that later. In the 80s, when he exploded, Rocky 3, Rocky 4, it was, 80s action. Sort of got away from the point there. Even though I love those movies, and we'll get into that. Rocky's a love story. The heartbeat of this movie is Adrian, Talia Shire. And what a perfect, perfect casting. Helicopter's going by. Adrian makes these movies. Adrian's the heartbeat. Polly, Burt Young, perfectly casted. Burgess, Mickey, old grumpy Mickey. You're gonna eat lightning and crap thunder. Man. You know, Apollo, mean Apollo Creed. And Duke, Apollo's trainer, Duke. Love Duke. Perfectly casted. Gazzo, you know, Rocky's hitman or hit boss or whatever you want to call it. Perfectly casted. Perfect. Perfect. So Rocky's a love story. And a great love story, you know, and the whole basis is, you know, Rocky's a bum. Nobody likes Rocky. Nobody respects Rocky. He's just a bum, like I said, just another bum on the corner of the neighborhood. And all Rocky wants to do is just to prove himself. He don't want to be champion of the world. He just wants to go toe-to-toe with the champion. Just to be able to say, hey, I done that. I can do this. And, you know, Rocky brings a lot of valuable lessons about life. You know, it ain't over. It's never over till it's over. So yeah, Rocky 1 is definitely a love story. And, you know, Butkus, that was his real dog. That's the one he had to sell. And, you know, and that incorporated, you know, at the pet store. And Adrian, you know, worked at the pet store. And he'd go by and tell her a joke. And, you know, he already loved Adrian. And, you know, his life revolved around, you know, making Adrian smile, making Adrian laugh. And Adrian was an outsider, just like he was an outsider. And so he connected with her, you know? And it's, I don't know, man. It's just feel good. I mean, of course, it won an Academy Award. It, you know, it got Best Picture. Stallone didn't get Best Actor. Got robbed, if you ask me. But yeah, I mean, everything was perfectly cast. It was, you know, and like he said, he, you know, in the movie, you know, he is like, all he wants to do is just go the distance. Just where everybody will know he's just not another bum in the neighborhood. And that's awesome, is what that is. That's just, it's just full of heart. And that's something we don't have anymore is, you know, people don't have heart, determination, you know, and myself included. I'm not saying you guys ain't got no, myself included. You know, we all need a little more heart, you know. And that one thing when they got together at the ice rink, she was skating, and he was like, "Don't fall, don't fall, don't fall," and you know, he was like, you know, my dad always told me I wasn't born with much of a brain, so, you know, I got to develop how to fight. Adrian's mother always told her, well, you wasn't born with much looks, so you got to develop your brain, you know. So you can be what you want to be. You just got to do it. You know, it's a lot easier said than done. You know, I've always been a big kid. You know, I've always been a big kid. I was always a big kid. I'm still a big guy. I'm a big guy, you know, and you know, maybe I should have learned more about working out through Rocky, which, you know, I dibble weights here and there and lost weight here and lost weight there and blah blah blah. But Rocky did teach me a lot about life. So yeah, going on, so Rocky, if you've not seen him, I mean, spoiler alerts. So end of Rocky 1, he does not win the fight. And going back to the opening of Rocky, he's fighting Spider Rico. The very opening shot is a picture of Christ. And it comes down into the screen, and it's a picture of Rocky and Spider fighting. Rocky's always, the Rocky movies is always sort of had an underlying religious aspect to it, especially the first one and the last one. But yeah, he never went, he went the distance. He didn't win the fight, and that's how it ended. And he was so in love with Adrian that she's coming through the crowd. And, Rocky had already been beat to death, and he lost the fight, but all he was worrying about was where Adrian's hat was. She said, "I love you." And he was like, "I love you too." And it's perfect. Perfect. So Rocky 2 opens up, and it shows this fight at the ending of this as well. And it opens up with him in the hospital, after the fight. And him and Apollo, they meet at the same hospital, and, and they're going to fight. And Mickey's like, "I don't care what them judges said. This is the man that won the fight." And, and Apollo just took him too lightly. They picked him because of his name. His main opponent in the first film backed out, or he got hurt, broke his arm, broke his hand, I think is what it was. And they was just trying, he was like, "Well, we'll give an underdog a shot." And he said, "There's one right there." And they was looking in this book of boxers, and it's like the Italian Stallion. And he's like, "Ooh, that sounds like a monster movie, the Italian Stallion, versus Apollo Creed. How many lines do you have? The King of Sting, the Count of Money." Anyway, but yeah, so Apollo took him lightly. And Apollo about got his ass whooped. Well, he did get his ass whooped, but he won. And so the second one is now, going on. Rocky's had surgery to repair his face. His nose was broke, all that stuff. And he decides he's not going to fight no more. This is in Rocky 2, so this is going to go a while. And Adrian don't want him fighting no more because they're afraid he'll go blind. And so he tries to fit back into the real world, get a job. Adrian's pregnant. Be a responsible person, get back, work for your family. That don't go too well because he's a fighter. It's what he does. It's what he's always done. So, jobs come, jobs go, and he ends up going back and working at the gym, cleaning out spit buckets and people making fun of him because he went to he fought the heavyweight champ of the world and he almost beat him. And all these tough macho assholes in the gym are like, "Yeah, carry off my spit, boy," and, very humiliating. Because he could probably stepped in the ring and whooped their ass, but that wasn't Rocky. Rocky is very humble and swallowed a lot of pride. Something we all have to do every once in a while. And if we haven't, maybe we should. But anyways, so Rocky decides he's going to start fighting. He's going to fight again. Because they keep pressuring him to fight Apollo because Apollo wants to just really rough him up and knock him out in a couple of rounds to prove that the first fight was a fluke. So they got him. Mickey's back. Everybody's back from the first film. And so Rocky starts training, but he's not really into it because Adrian's at home and Adrian's worried and Adrian don't want him to fight. And he loves his wife because at this point they've got married. They got married the first of the film. and Adrian is his world, so he don't want to hurt her. However, he is who he is, and he can't change himself. So Adrian goes into labor and has complications with Rocky Jr., Robert, and she slips into a coma. And from that point, when she slips into the coma, that 15 or 20 minutes of the movie is heartbreaking, and it's because he's not going to leave her side. He's not going to leave her side, and everybody's pressuring him. You got to get back to gym. You got to fight the champion, and the only thing he cares about is Adrian. So she has the baby, but she's still in a coma, and he won't see the baby because he wants to see the baby with Adrian. And lo and behold, Adrian wakes up, of course, right? And they see the baby, and still gives me cold chills to this day. She said she only wanted Rocky to do one thing for her. And he's like, yeah, what's that? Win. She wants him to win. And getting cold chills. And so, of course, Mickey's excited. Tickets, let's go, And then this starts throughout the movies, the training montage. And I'll put some pics up. Side note, me and my wife and one of my good friends and his wife got a chance to go to Philadelphia, and we done a Rocky tour, and we went to all these locations. I'm going to put some pics up. I got to see the steps. That was a bucket list. I got to see Rocky's apartment. I got to see, when I say we got to see, we ran the steps. We got to see the statue. We got to see the church where they got married. We got to see all this stuff. We got to go to Adrian's restaurant from Rocky Balboa. I'll put pics up. I'm not a bragging person. I'm not. But it was a bucket list for me, and I would like to share it. But, so, with that being said, so I'm going all the way back to when I was 8 years old, and me and my dad watched this. So he, the fight. Super Fight 2 is what they called it. And it was a lot more brutal than the first fight. He keep getting knocked down, and it's a classic story of life. You keep getting knocked down, but you get back up. Get back up. He kept getting back up. And then it was classic because they hit each other at the same time, and it practically knocks both of them out, and they both fall. I'm not a boxing historian. I don't know if it's ever been done before, but both of them fell. And the count's on. 1, 2. They're both, dazed. They're both reaching for ropes and pulling, trying to pull themselves up. And the count, and it gets to 9, and Apollo falls. 10, Rocky standing. So he wins the heavyweight championship of the world at the end of Rocky 2. And Adrian's at home. She's not at the fight. She's at home with the baby, with Paulie. Love Paulie, by the way. Paulie is a very key figure to the franchise, but that's where the famous line, "Yo, Adrian, I did it." He's holding the belt, and she's crying watching TV. And that's how it goes off, So, this was 79. So, 76 was Rocky 1, 79 was Rocky 2, and then in 82. So, we're following a 3-year pattern here. So, in 82, Rocky 3 comes out, and damn, what a surprise, right? I might try to find some pictures. So, you got Rocky 1, Rocky 2. Stallone's a pretty average guy. I mean, he's got a little bit of build to him. Rocky 3 comes out and he looks like freaking Arnold Schwarzenegger. Boom, all of a sudden he's buff, and he's heavyweight champion of the world, and he's cut, and he's a monster, and he's won all these fights and easily. And then it starts showing this new up-and-comer coming out, Mr. T. Clubber Lang, played by Mr. T. So Mr. T's the new up and hungry guy, and this is, like I said, this is now becoming, Rocky 3 is becoming an action film, and it's sort of straying away from what the first two pictures were. Great film, I love it. That's what just sold me on it. I wanted to look like Stallone. That never happened. I wanted to be Rocky. Rocky. But on the flip side, so Rocky bought into the fame. Now he lives. They're not the poor boys. He's not the poor guy anymore. He's world champion, and he lives in a mansion. They got cars and got money, and they dress in nice clothes, and so Paulie started off. Paulie's jealous. Even though Paulie lives with him, and Rocky's Paulie's meal ticket. Paulie is Adrian's brother. I'm skipping around a lot. Paulie Panino, Adrian Panino. But Paulie's a jealous guy. And so Paulie ties on a good drunk, and he goes out and he walks into the arcade. Remember those? Those was awesome, right? So he goes in the arcade, and it's wall-to-wall pinball machines, and there's a Rocky pinball machine. He's drunk. And he throws his whiskey bottle, busts the machine. He goes to jail, and of course, Rocky has to come bail him out. And so Rocky then, he, like I said, this is becoming an action movie. So, Rocky is now, he's the champion of the world, and he's going to fight the heavyweight wrestling champion of the world. Introducing the next big star, Hulk Hogan, was Thunder Lips, the ultimate male, versus the ultimate meatball. Looking back, it's corny as shit, but they do that. Anyways, and Mickey is starting to have, you can tell he's Mickey's getting older. We're 6 years into this now, or it's 6 years, 7, 8, 9 years, something like that. And Mickey's getting older, and Mickey's wanting to get out. He's wanting Rocky to retire. He's made it. He's heavyweight champion. What else you got to fight for? You're doing all this stupid publicity stuff because you're champion. That's what they're going to make you do. So he's wanting to get out. And that's when Mr. T comes in. He goes, so Rocky announces his retirement. He's like, okay, Mick, let's go. We'll get out. So Clubber Lang, they honor Rocky with a statue. And at this presentation is when Rocky says, I'm going to retire. And that's when Mr. T shows up. Clubber Lang shows up. He said, don't give that sucker no statue, give him guts. He won't fight me, because he's hungry. He wants that belt. And he's a bad dude. And Rocky's like, I'll fight you anywhere, anytime. And then Mickey's like, well, if you're going to fight him, you're going to do it without me, because I'm done. It's over. I'm finished. Well, Rocky talks Mickey into doing it. And they, Rocky half-ass trains for it. And, Rocky's believes his own press, that he's better, that he's the champ. He can beat anybody. So he just halfway trains. And guess what? Mr. T whoops that ass. I keep saying Mr. T. I apologize. Clubber Lang. Mr. T's the real man. Clubber Lang whoops Rocky's ass. But going into the ring, they're coming into the ring, and they have confrontation, and words are said back and forth, and Mickey gets pushed over to the side because they're coming into each other, and they're going to fight right there before they ever get to the ring, and Mickey has a heart attack, so Rocky has to go to the ring with his cut man and Paulie, not much of a, you know, a crew, a training crew with you. But so Rocky goes in and gets the crap beat out of him in 2 rounds, complete knockout. He comes back to the dressing room. He's destroyed, and Mickey, when he gets back to the dressing room, Mickey's went into cardiac arrest. He's still alive, but they got to get him to the hospital. And Mickey dies right there on the table. Pretty emotional little scene. And so they bury Mickey, or entomb Mickey. And so Rocky's done. Guess who shows back up on the scene? Apollo, right? Apollo Creed's back. So out of the blue, Apollo's back, and he's like, I know what it's like to get beat, and I know what it's like to, you know, but you didn't have that, and this is where it come from. You didn't have that eye of the tiger. He could tell in his eyes he didn't want it. He was beat before he ever even started. And Apollo's like, I'm going to get it back. We're going to get you back to the way you was. So, you know, Apollo is from California, and so Apollo takes Rocky and Adrian and Paulie back to where Apollo had started with Duke. So far, all the characters from the first 3 films is still in these first 3 films. So they start training him, and Rocky can't let it go because, you know, he's still hurting because Mickey's dead, and he's scared because he knows he's going to get the shit kicked out of him because Mr. T, he knows he's going to get the shit kicked out of him because Clubber Lane's a bad dude. Very bad guy. Dude is a beast. And so Rocky knows he can't beat him. So he quits. He gives up. Famous scene of them running on the beach. And he gives up. And that's when Adrian steps in again. And Adrian has to push him over and say, look, she knows you're scared, but, you know, you got to face your demons sometimes. You got to hit them head on. Whether you lose or whether you win, at least you can face your demons, you know, and face what's scaring you. And that's another lesson in life. You know, you don't want to, but sometimes you got to face them. And so that becomes the next big training montage, is getting Rocky strong, fast. And like Apollo said, you know, Rocky's got to knock him out quick because he can't do what he done to Apollo and go the distance. Back then was 15 rounds. You know, he's got to knock him out quick because he can't last as long as the younger Clubber Lang. And he does. So that fight went 3 rounds, and it's movie magic. You know, that last 3rd round, the song is called, is it War? No, it's not War. Redemption. I can't remember. But if you watch Rocky 2, from rounds 4 through 14 is this song. And if you watch Rocky 3, round 3 is the same song. Movie magic, right? But man, it is amazing. That fight's fantastic. But Rocky got his belt back. So now we're on to 1990. Whoa, way too far ahead. 1985's Rocky 4. And at this time, Stallone's on top of the world. He has the Rocky franchise that cannot do any wrong. He has the Rambo franchise that can't do anything wrong. And he's the biggest movie star in the world. So Rocky 4 comes out at, I think it's Thanksgiving, Christmas area. And of course, my mom and dad took me to see that with some friends of mine. And of course, you know, in 85, I would have been 13. It was the best thing I'd ever seen. I watched it 2 or 3 times on the opening weekend. And then it came to our local theater in Lafayette, Tennessee, is where I live. And we had one theater and showed one movie, and it showed it at 7 and 9 o'clock. So I went to the 7 o'clock. I went to the 9 o'clock. I went on Sunday matinee. I went to the Sunday 7 o'clock. And that was one of the first movies. I think it lasted for 4 weeks. They played that same movie 4 weeks. And I practically went every Friday night and Saturday. That's what all of us kids done, you know. That's where we all got together and went to the theater. I think I saw it like 15, 16 times in the theater. For Christmas that year, my mom and dad got me that Rocky Adidas sweatsuit. Had the red, white, and green, was it? Red, white, and green Adidas sweatsuit. I had that for Christmas. I had the Rocky, I had the Rocky boxing glove, necklace, and had the little hat he wore in Rocky 4. Wore Adidas shoes. Everything was Rocky with me. And, still the big fat kid, but damn, I thought I was Rocky. And Rocky was my world, still is my world. But yeah, so Rocky was your typical mid-80s action film. So, now he's retired again, living peaceful, and all of a sudden, this is in the heyday of the 80s and the Reaganomics, and Russia is the enemy, and so Stallone writes it as, okay, so now Russians coming over. It's going to take over. And entering Dolph Lundgren as Ivan Drago. And Stallone's real wife at the time, Brigitte Nielsen, was Drago's wife. What was her name? Ludmilla. Was that it? Ludmilla Drago. Something like that. But all the returning cast still is involved, Apollo, Duke, Adrian, Paulie, not Mickey, because Mickey passed away in the third film. But everybody else is coming back. And Rocky won't fight this guy. And so Apollo wants back in the ring to get, relive some of his glory. And he's going to fight this guy. And this guy is supposedly the modern athlete. He's big, chiseled. And there's scenes where he hits so many 1,000 pounds of pressure or whatever, typical 80s movie because it's bullshit. But ends up, Apollo's going to do an exhibition fight with this Russian. And not only does this Russian destroy him, but he kills him. And Rocky is in Apollo's corner with Duke and Paulie. And Rocky's wanting to throw the towel, which in boxing means I quit. And he goes to throw the towel, and, Apollo's like, don't throw the towel. And anyways, it kills him. And there's another, on this new 4K box set, they've come out with the Rocky versus Drago extended cut, which gets rid of some of the 80s stuff, like Rocky had a robot, and, got rid of some of that kind of stuff, made the Apollo fight a little longer, the Rocky Drago fight a little grittier. But, I just skipping through it real quickly. I mean, everybody's seen Rocky 4, So Rocky's going to avenge Apollo's death. He goes to Russia. He's training in the snow with Paulie and Duke, which was Apollo's trainer. And, he overcomes the odds and he beats the Russian. And I know I'm skimming fast through Rocky 4 because Rocky 4 was my favorite for years and years and years because I was obsessed with that. Looking back now, it's might not be. I'm not going to rank them. They're Rockies. They're all good, but it's not one of my favorites. So going on to Rocky 5. Now, Rocky 5 is the black sheep of the series. Rocky 5 is, so, after the fight with Drago, Rocky's been beat so bad that he has, quote unquote, I say quote unquote, but in the film, they portray it as he has brain damage. While they was in Russia, Paulie gave what he thought was power of attorney, some tax documents or something, but to come to find out, it was a scam, and this guy lost all of Rocky's money. So when he gets back from Russia after he's been beat up and retired, he gets back to find out that he has brain damage and he lost everything. Lost the mansions, lost the houses, lost the cars, and he lost it all. And all they had left was the house that Adrian and Paulie lived in Rocky 1. They'd never sold it. That's all they had left. And also they had Mickey's gym. Mickey had left that to Rocky in his will when he passed away. So they had a house and they had a gym. And I think Rocky Stallone overacted on this. I think he overacted on the brain damage part. Rocky 5, most people say is the worst Rocky movie, and it probably is, but there's elements in it that I truly love. When he sees Mickey, and when Rocky's down on his luck and he's having to move back to the hard streets of Philadelphia, back to the old house that Adrian and Paulie lived in, and he's having a moment in the gym, and he's thinking back of when Mickey trained him to fight Apollo to win the belt, and how much Mickey meant to him, and he gave him his necklace and all of this stuff. But that one line, he is like, Mickey says, when you're down and I didn't hear no bell. I didn't hear no bell. Get up, you son of a bitch, because Mickey loves you. And that still brings chills to my eye. That's a fantastic scene. So this punk coming in, and he's like, I'm going to be the next Rocky, and I'm going to be the next heavyweight champion. I just need somebody to train me. I need some tutelage, some training. And it's Tommy Gunn, and it was played by Tommy Morrison, which was at the time was a real life fighter, and big guy. And so Rocky trains him. Of course, he turns on him, and there's no fight in this movie, as far as a boxing fight between Rocky and his student Tommy. It's out in the street. But there is another great line in this movie that I absolutely love, and I think about it all the time. So, Tommy's coming to provoke Rocky, because the trainer, all they want to do is get Rocky into the ring for money, to make it the biggest boxing fight of trainer fighting student, Rocky versus the kid that turned his back on him, and so that's what they're wanting to do. So Paulie jumps in at this bar, Andy's bar, which once again goes back. I got pictures of when we went there. I'll put them up. Another bucket list. I got to go there. So Tommy comes into this bar, and he's like, hey, he said, I would have beat you anytime. And Paulie sort of jumps in, because Paulie's got a mouth. And I love that about Paulie. He's like, look here. He's like, Rocky gave you your shot. Without Rocky, you're nothing. And, Tommy wiles back and just pops Paulie, and Paulie falls down with the busted mouth. He's got blood coming out of his mouth. And Rocky runs over, and he goes, Paulie, and Paulie's like, you should have left him in the streets where you found him. Because, jumping back, Rocky sort of forsaken his child, because Tommy was his meal ticket to get him out of the streets. So, Rocky was trying to pump him up all along. Rocky Jr., Robert, was getting bullied in school, needing his dad's attention, and his attention was not. He didn't get his dad's attention because his dad's attention was fully on Tommy, trying to get him out of the poverty that they was in. And watch that. That's a good part of the movie. It's a good human part of the movie. But going back to that scene where Polly got knocked down, and he's like, "You should have left him in the streets where you found him." And Rocky said, famous line. I love this line. He's like, "You knocked him down. Won't you try knocking me down now?" And you can tell, game's on. And that fight, and they go out in the street and they have a street fight. I think that's where it went wrong in Rocky. There's a blueprint of Rocky 5 where supposedly Stallone was going to die. You know, Rocky was going to die in this movie. I don't think they ever filmed it because I've never seen it, and I'm glad I didn't. You know, Rocky's my hero. I don't want my heroes to die. But it's a hell of a street fight. It's a damn good fight. It was not the ring. It was not what people, and this is in 90. So it went from 85 to 90. So we jumped 5 years from 4 to 5. And then that was it. You know, Rocky did beat him up, won the street fight. But he's still broke, still lives in poverty. And I think that's what got a lot of people, you know. Their hero was back to being a broke bum in the neighborhood. I didn't see it that way. I personally seen it as, you know, he overcame another obstacle. Yeah, he still lives. He's not a rich millionaire in mansion no more, but he got his family back, and he won, and he got his son's respect back, and you know, that's what it's all about. So he took care of his family. Now, I'm not saying the movie had, you know, it's probably is one of the worst of the franchises, but it still had some very good moments in it and had some heart in it, and I appreciate that of the film. But, you know, with that being said, it was still like something was missing. And this was in 1990. And all of us Rocky fans, all we had was Rocky 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that's all we had. And it was over from 76 to 1990. But something just didn't seem right. Until Rocky Balboa, 2006. 2006. After 16 years, it was I guess you could say probably 2004 or 2005. It was announced that there was going to be another Rocky. And like I said, you know, that came with a lot of jokes. You know, Stallone at this time is 58, 59 years old. You know, who's Rocky going to fight? He's going to get in a wheelchair and they're going to roll him in the ring. And I wasn't skeptical because I was excited because of you know, I was hoping Stallone would, you know, sort of close it, how, you know, on a good note. But then I heard that Adrian was not going to be in it. That Talia Shire was not going to be in it, and it wasn't because she didn't want to be in it. Stallone had written her out of the script that she had passed away. Then I was super skeptical. Skeptical? I was intrigued. How about that? And not in a good way. Because Adrian is the heartbeat of the Rocky movies. Adrian is the Rocky movies. And I was not happy about that at all. And then I started reading that Adrian had passed away of, once the movie come out, you'll say, of woman cancer. She had died of woman cancer. And but the whole movie is based on Adrian, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Now I'm just going to go ahead and tell you right up front, Rocky Balboa is the best movie I have ever seen. It closed the story fantastic. It was a beautiful movie. It went back to the origins of Rocky 1 and Rocky 2 and somewhat Rocky 5. All of this, hoorah action stuff of part 3 and part 4, which I liked. It was none of that. It went back to the heart of the film, the heart of the story, which was what Rocky was to begin with. So it opens up, and Adrian's passed away, and every year on the anniversary of her death, Polly's back in the story, and Polly kills it in this movie. Absolutely kills it. He should have got nominated for an Academy Award. Personally, I think him and Stallone both should have. But so Rocky goes back and sort of does like a little tour of all their places. So he goes back to the pet shop, and he goes back to where the ice rink used to be, and and Polly is bitter. Of course, Polly's always bitter, but Polly's bitter. He's like, I can't live like this. You're living in the past, and I can't live like this. And he was like, you was good to her, Rocky, and she was my sister, and I treated her bad. And he don't like living back because he has a lot of remorse for how he treated Adrian, and so he has a lot of trouble with that. But that being said, so the whole movie is about Adrian. Rocky's opened up a restaurant. It's called Adrian's, and is successful with it. And there's this new boxing champion. It's sort of the way boxing is now. There's no glory. There's no, like back when there was Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali and all these champions, it was larger than life. Now there's champions, nobody knows their name, and it's sort of the way this was. It was nobody knew who the champion even was anymore, and so on ESPN they have a computer fight, what they call a computer fight, and Paulie's back at the old meat packaging plant where he used to work at, where Rocky hit the meat in part 1, and Paulie's back working there. Rocky's running the restaurant, and Paulie hears about this fight, and Robert, which is Rocky Jr., is an accountant or something. I don't really say it, but he's something that, he's in the business world, and he has to live in his daddy's shadows, and everybody thinks, he's not Robert, he's Rocky's son, and that gets to him pretty bad. And it's a very heartwarming story, and so this fight comes on ESPN, and Paulie had heard about it, and he comes into the restaurant, and he goes, here's this cartoon fight I'm telling you about. So, it's on Xbox or whatever, but it takes a former champion. What would happen if a Muhammad Ali would have fought the new champion or whatever? But it ends up being, what if this new champion would have fought Rocky Balboa in his prime? Well, the computer simulator or video game or whatever you want to say shows Rocky would have won. Well, they start showing it to this champion guy, and he gets sort of pissy about it. He's like, I'd have beat him. There's no way. Well, he's not popular. He's not making any money. Nobody's coming to the fights. So his management team was like, hey, let's do an exhibition. See if Rocky's still available. So they come and they talk to him and at the restaurant, and Rocky's like, I'm not about to get beat up. As he says, mangled. But Rocky thinks about it. He's like, well, maybe I can fight. Maybe I still can fight. You know, he's a fighter. And come to find out, so he starts to, apply for a license. And he gets one. The brain injury thing from Rocky Five sort of takes a back seat. But when he's out, doing some things, running around, he goes into old Andy's bar from the first movie, the second movie, even in the third movie. And he goes into Andy's bar, and there's a bartender, and he's like, hey, give me a beer. He calls it a short beer, whatever a short beer is. I guess a little bitty beer, maybe. I don't know. And she gives one. She's like, I heard about your wife. And he's like, thank you. Yeah, that's when she died of woman cancer. And he was like, do I know you? And she's like, yeah, we met a long time ago. Well, come to find out, this is the girl in part one, Little Marie, from the Atomic Hoagie Shop. And back in the very first movie, it's not the same actor, of course, but back in the first movie, he walks this girl home. She's out on the corner smoking, and she's cool, and all this stuff. And he tells her to, get her act together, and she's gonna be known as a whore and all this stuff. And she looks at him. She goes, "Hey, Rocky." And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Screw you, creepo." And so Rocky's like, well, "I tried to help." You can see the dejection in his face. I tried to help, but. Comes to find out now she's a bartender at Andy's. So they strike up a conversation, and throughout the movie, I won't go through all of it, they strike up a friendship, nothing romantically involved. Rocky, this whole film is about Adrian, and how Adrian is still in his heart, in his, everyday life. Even though she's not in the movie, it's all about Adrian, and that's with Talia Shire's blessing. Because she loved it when she had read the script, and I thought that was fantastic. And but anyway, Little Marie is a very good part in this movie. I really like the actress who done it. She done a great. She done she played that role very, very well, and she had a son. I'm not going to go through all the hits, but anyways, come to find out, so Rocky accepts the fight, and he's worried. He's worried about people making fun of him because he's almost 60 years old, and then he starts to train, and he's training, and he can't lift. He can't lift like he used to. He can't run like he used to. He's getting old. I mean, he's an older guy, so he can't do. So they try to build him as strong as they possibly can. Because, and Duke's back in this movie. Just a side note. Of course, Adrian Pictures is in this movie and all of that. But there's 3 actors that's been in every Rocky movie, from Rocky to Rocky Balboa. Stallone, of course, is Rocky Balboa. Paulie, it's fantastic. And Duke. Tony Burton was his name. He was in this. He passed away not much longer after, I think, Rocky Balboa was done. But I forgot Spider Rico from the very first scene in Rocky is also in this. He works in Rocky's restaurant. It's just neat how he tied it all together. It's fantastic. Stallone done a fantastic job with this. Like I said, it's probably one of my all-time favorite movies. I've got the cover tattooed on my leg. I mean, Rocky meant everything to me, which I guess Stallone did too. But I've got the DVD box, but that's my tattoo right there. I'll try to put a picture up. This is the 4K of Rocky Balboa. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Same way with Rocky 5. There's Rocky 5. But in the same fashion of the first film, they recorded 3 different endings, and it's all the specials. But in the theatrical cut, just like the first film, Rocky went the distance. He didn't win. but he proved his necessary. And in the film, you don't, all these Rocky movies, and especially 3 and 4, Stallone don't never have a shirt on because he's ripped and he's showing all this stuff. Well, now, he's back to being the original Rocky character. He wears an sweatshirt and an overcoat and another overcoat, and he wears his hat, and so you never see him. And then when you finally do see him, you don't even see him without a shirt on in the training montage. But when you see him in the ring and he takes his shirt, or takes his robe off, you're like, holy shit, this dude is 60 years old and built better than most 30 years old. Stallone really went above and beyond to get this film made and make it realistic, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved it. I'm gonna show some. I got to when we went on our little tour, we got to go to Adrian's grave and Paulie's grave. The headstones are still there. Which Paulie didn't die in this movie. So spoiler alert. He died in between this and Creed. I'm not going to go into the Creed movies. I thought the first Creed was pretty good. Stallone actually won an award. But my thing about the Creed movies is I don't think Apollo Creed's son, Adonis, is a likable character. I don't like it. I just... Everything, if Rocky's in the picture and Rocky's in the scenes, I loved it. Thought it was great. But I didn't... fall in love with Adrian Creed, or Adrian Johnson. I'm not going. Y'all can Google the Creed stuff, but Rocky was in Creed 1 and Creed 2. He was not in Creed 3. All the fallout and all that. I'm just Rocky through Rocky Balboa is my Rocky story, and that's where it ended for me, far as the way I want to remember Rocky. Thought Stallone was great in Creed. However, he got cancer. He had to fight cancer, and those was great scenes. They was really good, but it's not the way I want to remember Rocky. That's how I want to remember Rocky. This guy. So, I know this has been long and drawn out, and I just thought I'd try something new besides, music, just to let you guys, into my my Rocky universe. In Rocky Balboa, nobody ever hits as hard as life, and the speech he gave in that was fantastic. And Rocky's full of life lessons. You don't have to be a sports fan, a boxing fan, to really, really enjoy. Especially, you could almost take part 1 and part 2 and Rocky Balboa, and watch those 3 as a 2 or 4, 6-hour long movie. They all fit together really nicely, and I think Stallone done a fantastic job of closing the series. And nobody wanted to make it, just like nobody wanted to make the original Rocky. And it ended up doing really, really well. And so that's my rambling about Rocky. I appreciate you guys watching, as always. I love doing this kind of stuff. I like coming out here to the shop and getting on here and, telling some stories. And I appreciate everybody that watches and likes and comments, subscribes. It means the world to me when I see somebody's watched it. It really does. And like always, I'm going to say, don't be a dick. Be nice to everybody. God bless each and every one of you, and we'll catch you next time. Appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.